If you were born before 1955, I need you to hear this clearly because there is a strong chance, not a small one, a real and documented chance that the check landing in your account every month is wrong. Not wrong by a few cents, wrong by hundreds of dollars a month, every month, stacking up year after year. And the reason has nothing to do with anything you did. It has to do with a law that changed less than 2 years ago, a law that was supposed to fix this automatically for everyone affected. And yet, right now, in 2026, there are still people in exactly your generation who have not seen a single extra dollar because the fix never reached them. I'm Peter Reynolds, and today I want to walk you through exactly why this is happening, exactly who it affects, and exactly what you need to do this week to find out if you are one of the people still owed money. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because understanding the history here is what makes the urgency click. For decades, there were 2 rules buried inside Social Security law that quietly punished a specific group of people, almost entirely public servants. These provisions reduced or eliminated the Social Security benefits of over 2.8 million people who receive a pension based on work that was not covered by Social Security. We are talking about teachers, firefighters, police officers, postal workers, federal employees who spent their careers under a different retirement system. This law increased Social Security benefits for certain types of workers, including teachers, firefighters, and police officers in many states, federal employees covered by the civil service retirement system, and people whose work had been covered by a foreign social security system. If you spent even part of your career in one of these roles, and you also worked other jobs across your lifetime where you did pay into Social Security the normal way, the old rules reached into your check and took money out of it, sometimes a little, sometimes a devastating amount, simply because you also had a pension from a job that did not pay into the system. Social Security Administration, Social Security Administration. These 2 provisions had names: the Windfall Elimination Provision and the Government Pension Offset, and people who lived under them for years called them exactly what they felt like, because the late columnist Mike Causey dubbed them the Evil Twins. Here is what the Government Pension Offset specifically did to people, and I want you to really sit with this one, because it was brutal in its original form. Before the official repeal, if a retired teacher or firefighter tried to claim a survivor benefit based on their deceased spouse's private sector work history, the federal government would legally reduce that survivor payout by exactly 2/3 of the teacher's own public pension. And here is the part that should make your stomach turn a little. In many tragic cases, this massive calculation completely erased the survivor benefit, reducing it to exactly $0. Zero. A widow or widower who had spent 30 years as a public school teacher, who lost a spouse, who should have been entitled to survivor benefits earned through that spouse's lifetime of work, got nothing simply because of the offset formula. And the windfall elimination provision worked similarly on a person's own retirement benefit, not their survivor benefit. Under the old laws, if you received a non-covered pension from your state government job, the federal agency would legally reduce your primary Social Security benefit, sometimes by over exactly $500 every single month. Government Executive Plus 3. Now here is where the story turns, because on January 5th, 2025, something genuinely rare happened in Washington. The act was signed into law on January 5th, 2025, ending the windfall elimination provision and government pension offset entirely, both evil twins gone permanently by federal law. And the relief was not just forward-looking starting from the date of signing, the law reached backward. December 2023 is the last month that WEP and GPO will apply, meaning those rules no longer apply to benefits payable for January 2024 and later, which means anyone affected was owed not just a higher check going forward, but back pay covering the entire stretch from January 2024 onward. Starting February 25th, 2025, SSA began adjusting monthly benefit payments to people whose benefits have been affected by the WEP and GPO, and most affected beneficiaries began receiving their new monthly benefit amount in April 2025. By the middle of 2025, the agency reported genuinely staggering numbers. As of July 7th, 2025, they completed sending over 3.1 million payments, totaling $17 billion, to beneficiaries eligible under the Social Security Fairness Act, 5 months ahead of schedule. $17 billion handed back to people who had been shortchanged for years. Social Security Administration plus 3. Now you might be sitting there thinking, that sounds like a success story. The government actually fixed something. Good for them. But what does that have to do with me right now in the middle of 2026? Here is exactly why this still matters today and why I specifically called out anyone born before 1955 in the title of this video. The people who fall into that birth window are, by definition, well past full retirement age at this point, which means an enormous share of you were already collecting Social Security or were eligible to be collecting it well before this law ever passed, which means if WEP or GPO ever touched your benefit or your spouse's benefit or a benefit you were owed as a survivor, you have potentially been living for over a year now with a corrected system that has not yet corrected your specific account. And that is not a hypothetical. That is happening, documented right now. Here is the part that I think every single person in your generation needs to hear, because it is the difference between getting your money and never seeing it. A year after the Social Security Fairness Act, some retirees are still waiting for full benefits. This was reported as recently as March of this year. The Social Security Administration itself has acknowledged that certain categories of people are taking longer to process, specifically calling out 3 groups by name. SSA is currently working to calculate benefit changes for those who have never applied for Social Security at all, knowing that they would be impacted by WEP or GPO. Those who never applied for spousal benefits, knowing they would be impacted by GPO. And those who are among the approximately 500,000 Americans who have cases pending with SSA for other reasons. Read that first category again carefully. People who never even applied for Social Security in the first place, because under the old rules, the offset was going to wipe out their benefit anyway, so why bother? If that describes you, if you looked at the old GPO rules years ago and decided filing simply was not worth the paperwork because your benefit would have been reduced to almost nothing or completely zeroed out, that calculation no longer applies, and right now, the system may not even know you exist as an eligible claimant because you never filed in the first place. Government Executive U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski. There is also a real and documented dispute happening right now over exactly how far back certain people's payments should go, and this matters specifically for protected spouses. Senators Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, John Cornyn, and John Fetterman sent a letter to SSA Administrator Leland Dudek requesting a review of agency policy to grant maximum retroactive payments to protected spouses affected by the SSFA back to January 2024. This tells you something important. Even sitting U.S. senators, the people who actually wrote this law, are still pushing the agency in 2026 to pay certain people the full amount they are owed, because some retroactive payments have been getting capped at a shorter window than the law actually allows. According to the SSA handbook, full retirement age and survivor claims may be paid retroactively up to 6 months. If you are someone who falls into a protected category and you assumed the system automatically gave you every dollar going back to January 2024, you may want to verify that assumption rather than trust that it happened correctly without you checking. Government executive, government executive. I also want to clear up a genuine point of confusion here, because I have seen people misunderstand exactly who this law applies to, and misunderstanding that wastes your time. This repeal does not touch every retiree in America. The repealed WEP and GPO provisions exclusively targeted public sector workers who received non-covered pensions, meaning jobs where they did not physically pay the standard Social Security payroll tax. If you spent your entire career in a job where Social Security tax was deducted from every paycheck, private sector, most ordinary employment, this specific fix was never about you, and you should not expect a letter related to this particular issue. But if at any point in your working life you held a position covered by a state pension system that opted out of Social Security, a teacher's retirement system, certain police and fire pension funds, the civil service retirement system, if you were a federal employee hired before 1984, or a foreign pension system, then this absolutely could apply to you, and it is worth checking even if you assume it does not, because eligibility rules around partial careers and mixed work histories get complicated fast, and complicated is exactly where people fall through the cracks. For media. So here is exactly what I want you to do, and I want you to actually do this, not just nod along and forget about it by tomorrow. First, if you are already receiving Social Security and you believe you were ever affected by either the windfall elimination provision or the government pension offset, confirm directly with the Social Security Administration that your account has actually been recalculated and that you received both the retroactive lump sum covering the period back to January 2024 and the corrected higher monthly amount going forward. Do not assume silence means it already happened correctly. Second, if you are a widow or widower who was ever told in the past that you did not qualify for a survivor benefit because the old offset rule reduced it down to zero, that calculation has changed completely, and surviving spouses are now legally entitled to collect their complete public pension alongside their full unreduced Social Security survivor benefit simultaneously. You need to reapply or at minimum call and ask whether your case requires a new application. Third, if you decided years ago, for any reason, not to file for Social Security at all because you assumed the offset would erase your benefit, stop assuming and call the agency directly, because that category of never filed applicants is specifically named as one of the groups SSA is still actively working through right now in 2026 for iMedia. When you call, here is exactly how to get to the right person quickly, because this is a specialized issue and you do not want to get bounced around a general call queue. Call 1-800-772-1213, and when the system asks how it can help you today, say the words Fairness Act. That phrase routes you specifically toward representatives trained on this exact provision, rather than a general agent who may not be familiar with the nuances of WEP and GPO recalculations. Have your Social Security number ready? Have any pension documentation on hand? And have any old correspondence from Social Security available if you have kept it? Because the more documentation you can put in front of them, the faster they can locate exactly where your case stands. House. I want to be honest with you about one more thing before I let you go, because false hope helps nobody. The government will not refund any financial penalties deducted in 2023 or earlier. The retroactive relief here has a hard floor at January 2024. If you were affected by these provisions for the 15, 20, 30 years before that date, those specific past reductions are not being repaid retroactively beyond that point. That is simply the boundary Congress wrote into the law. But going forward from January 2024 and for every month for the rest of your life from this point on, the correction is real, it is permanent, and if it has not reached your account yet, it is sitting there waiting for you to claim it, not the other way around. For iMedia. This is exactly the kind of situation where the system genuinely tried to do right by people, passed a real law, processed billions of dollars in real payments, and still, somehow, manages to leave a meaningful number of people behind simply because the machinery of a federal agency processing millions of complex individual cases moves unevenly. If you were born before 1955, you lived through enough decades of work, enough decades of pension rules, enough decades of marriages and survivorships that the odds of you intersecting with this somewhere along the way are genuinely real. Make the call, ask the specific question, confirm the specific number, because the worst outcome here is not finding out you were never affected at all. The worst outcome is being affected, being owed real money every single month, and never finding out because you assumed someone else would tell you first. If this helped you understand something you did not know walking in, stay with me, because there is more of this system worth pulling apart, one rule at a time.